Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're joined by Ed Harrold as we discuss the science of breathwork, and Ed shares some powerful messages on love, kindness, and human connection. Ed shares why he believes that our breath can help us to put us in these states of more love and kindness and remember our human nature. Remember what it means to be human. So without further ado, let's hop on over into my conversation, this episode of the podcast with Ed Harrold. Ed, welcome to Raising Consciousness. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Luke. Thanks for having me with your amazing audience.
Welcome. You're welcome. If somebody has decided to press play on this podcast, what can they expect from our conversation today?
Well, that your life is very, very valuable. And it's important that you follow your dreams, you follow your feminine intuition, and you help yourself by helping humankind. It's humankind, not human war. And life takes place one breath at a time, one awareness at a time, and one action at a time. And just know that we live in this sea of consciousness that's attempting to wake us up from 1,000-year-old slumber.
You mentioned feminine intuition. What's that?
Feminine intuition has the ability to see a potential future further out than the male energy. The way the woman's body is shaped, the way the hips are shaped, it's not just a birthing device for other human beings. It's also a birthing device for new thought forms, new self-awarenesses that might not have been available to you yesterday that are there today. So we live in this very male-based linear world, which is wonderful to some degree. But if we can harness the healthy feminine and somewhat trust our gut, trust the whispers of our heart, I think we can be led into a more blissful state of existence.
And how does one do that? Maybe like on the practical level, that is more of a masculine thing, but I'm wondering, like, I think sometimes a lot of people have the hard time they have with, if it's intuition or more like spiritual matters, is like you can't measure that, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
something that you can physically see. And so I'm wondering how, I'm sure we've all experienced, I know that I've experienced those moments of like just intuition where it's beyond any explanation, right? I've just like felt something about, okay, this is the right path. But yeah, I'm kind of wondering like how people can embody that and move into that more rather than, as you're saying, like this world that we live in today is very um yeah, they want to kind of measure everything, and I guess they want the practical kind of applications to everything, if that makes
Well,
sense.
the good news is that we've all already done it. So from the time of our birth up to 7 years, you're in what's called the theta brainwave pattern. And it's a much slower pulsing of the brain, and the brain is in a learning mode. And it adapts to the environment that you're in. It downloads all the information from your five senses. It stores it in your subconscious, in your hindbrain, the small brain, the cerebellum. So it's actually something that we've already done. It isn't anything new, and it's already installed in the DNA. The DNA actually just is a storage device, and it holds information. So if life is moving very quickly and there's a lot of what we would call negative stress, the first thing we need to do is get in our body and be present with whatever is available to you at that particular moment. And the first thing I like to do is to really slow down my inhale. And as I slow down the inhale, it creates safety in my brain, and I become more conscious in my two prefrontal cortexes. And I can see a wider playing field of what the opportunity for me is in this second without contracting. I'm more open. So being a lifelong learner, I think, is one of the really great keys to being a human being, to have a human brain, because we know it's plastic. We know you can change awareness about people, places, and things in your past if you so choose to. So I think slowing down the pace of the brain, getting into the body because the body's always in the present moment. Intuition is always in the present moment. It's not in yesterday. It's not in tomorrow. It's only concerned with right now. And I think everybody needs to come to the understanding that we're all artists. We're all
Mm.
painting and dancing and moving through this amazing realm that we're living in right now. And we're all creating masterpieces. And, not every day is going to be the greatest day of your life, but the greatest times of learning is when there's resistance to being ourselves.
Why do you think we live in a very masculine driven world?
Well, I think if we look at the senseless wars that we see over real estate, when we see, you know, old traditions. So this family would fight this family, and this family would fight this family, and it's just what they did. That's all they knew. Now we're living in a time where we're birthing new youngsters who are more aware that war is the last option. Why don't we sit down and see if we can communicate and see where we're in agreement about maybe where there's a disagreement? Or see if there's a way that we can get from Friday to Saturday without killing each other. Because no one wins in war at all. Nothing ever changes. So when you think about war, I think about a sense of lack in the male
Mm.
testosterone where it needs to defend itself. And it's all fear. It's all insecurity. There's no love in war. Nobody ever wins in war. And when you add that to the fact that, for most of recorded history, women were second class citizens. They weren't allowed to vote. In still some places of the world, they're not able to go out in public and show their face. So, I think there's a dysfunctional male energy that's afraid of being feminine. It's afraid
Mm.
of being soft. It has to pump its chest out and say, hey, look at me. And that's just all posturing around fear. There's no love in that. So I think we live at a time where the feminine energy is rising up very, very quickly. I think we see women moving in through politics and business and entrepreneurship like never before. And I think it makes the world a better place, not a worse place.
I agree in terms of like that posturing from like that masculine energy. What I've come to learn is often rooted in, as you said, fear and in insecurity, right? So if there are men out there right now um, who resonate kind of with that, and they aren't necessarily in the place where they want to be in their lives, how does one start to actually face those insecurities and be more acceptive and embody more of the feminine energy intuition that we've been talking about so far?
Yeah, great question. I think it begins with communication. I think it begins with beginning to listen a little deeper inside your story. So it might begin by just lengthening and straightening your spine, planting your feet firmly down onto the earth, and then just choosing to take one breath as slow as you possibly can and listen inside your mind and body to what's there in that particular moment. And no matter what it is, pretend you're Switzerland. Don't take sides. There's no
Mm.
good, there's no bad. It's just energy moving through your brain based on old thought forms from your birth that have led you to this moment. And most of the time, when I'm acting in a way that's beneath my heart or beneath my spirit, I'm unconscious.
Mm.
My eyes are open, but I'm actually playing an old tape from something that I watched when I was a young child and I didn't know any better. So the idea might be the original body hack or the original biohack is straighten your spine. And as soon as you straighten your spine and slow your breath, you move into the top of your brain. It's an amazing place of learning for adults to re educate ourselves from time to time, to learn new skills. Be curious again. Paint outside of the lines. Don't worry about what it looks like. Just hang in there with it and know that you're safely held during your whole journey. But the idea, I think, what's happening today on the earth is to wake up.
Looking into your work, it looks like, and it's been spoken about in this episode so far, the breath. It's like we're coming back to the breath, right? Straightening our spine and slowing our breathing down, focusing on that
Mm-hmm.
inhale, as you said. Talk to us about the breath and its importance in not just only what we're talking about in this context, but from a more, well, I guess we'll come on to it from a more kind of broader perspective as well, because I think when we look at health overall, there's a lot of information out there to do with nutrition and sleep and exercise,
Mm-hmm.
which are all obviously vitally important. And I think like over the last 3, 5 years, like more importance has been focused on breathing, breath work practices, etc. But would love to dive into that 'cause I know that that's your or at least one of your focuses as well. But if we start kind of with like the context in terms of the breath and what we're talking about, or what we have been talking about so far.
Well, I think breath is the perfect bridge between science and spirit and science. And, breathing, how we're breathing affects our body, the longevity of the life of our cells, and the body sensations affect our breathing. So when we think about it, we have this inhale and we have this thoracic diaphragm muscle, which is the primary muscle of inhale. And when we
Mm,
inhale, it vertically presses down into our body and it stabilizes our legs, it balances us on our feet, it straightens the spine, and it creates a wonderful relaxation response in a minor nervous system called your enteric nervous system. And that's where 90% of the body's serotonin and 50% of the body's dopamine rest. So the stronger this diaphragm muscle can get in pressing down on the inhale, the thicker the muscle can get, the more you can activate two neurochemicals that are extremely helpful to enjoying our life, being happy, knowing that anger and resentment are a choice, and we can discard those choices. Now, the exhale, hopefully it comes out through the nose. You contract your abdominal muscles. This forces the thoracic diaphragm up towards your heart and lungs. And when you exhale through the nose, you create enough pressure on the out breath for a tremendous amount of oxygen to move through your brain. Your brain is the highest part of your body against gravity. So if you're exhaling through your mouth, that air is coming out quickly. You're not getting that full exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your brain. And, the brain is always in this self preservation type mode. Like it
mm,
doesn't take a lot to throw the brain off, and then we move into fear, danger. And most of the time, they're just thoughts and shallow breaths. So just getting back to the basics, that slowing down your inhale, connecting with your body so you're present, you're awake in this moment. You're not asleep with your eyes open. And then always exhaling longer than your inhale, but try to do it through your nose. There's some great science that says 80% of our waste is burned on the exhale through our nose from the lungs. The other 20% is through sweat, urination, and evacuation of our bowels. So as we age, obviously our energy levels start to drop and we begin to put inflammation on in the body. If we can continue to exhale longer than our inhale, our body will burn fat all day long. It'll reduce inflammatory markers, so you circulate more energy like you had in your youth. You'll have a lower heart rate. Your blood pressure will be steady. So thinking about just the simple things that you can do to get control of your body so that you can control your mind.
I love that, and it kind of relating it back to what we were talking when we kicked off this episode off. I'm making a connection between like when we're in probably more of that masculine state and of like stress and posturing and stuff. Like we're not super conscious, right? So that for our
Right.
breath is going to be, let's just use the word like erratic. We're not going to be, we're probably going to be like mouth breathing, in stress and fear and in kind of these high emotional states, which is going to put so much stress like overall on our bodies and the chemicals and the processes that are going on ultimately. If somebody is just starting their quote unquote breathwork journey or just starting to learn about the breath and just starting to learn about its importance, where would you recommend that they start? Is it about throughout their day checking in and seeing like how they are, like consciously breathing, or would you recommend like a breathwork practice per se?
Hmm.
Um, where do people
Great,
start?
great question. So, number one, you want to begin with closing your mouth. The mouth breathing is simply an emergency breathing mechanism to keep us alive if there's a clogging of the sinuses from a bacteria or virus, or it's a very primitive way of breathing in the ancient times to get food or not get eaten. Bring up a quick burst of energy for like 90 seconds, 2 minutes, a lot of adrenaline, get super hyped up, and either protect your life or go get food. So we're not living in a time like that now. The supermarkets, have our food, and what we're responding to today is thoughts. So these are just thoughts, but the body listens to these thoughts and it thinks these thoughts are real. So in other words, if I
Mm,
have a phobia about flying and I don't want to be on a plane, if I think about flying, my breath will get faster. My heart rate will go up. My digestion will stop. All the blood will go out into my arms and legs as if I'm fighting this flight. So it's a very intricate connection in the nervous system between the mind and the body, your awareness and your energy. So when you're learning a new skill, first notice during the day, if I'm breathing through my mouth, with compassion, ask yourself, where's the danger? Where is the lion that's going to eat me? So there's a difference between fear and danger. Okay, danger is real. Get yourself out of danger and get back to safety. Fear is a thought form, and it's something you might have subconsciously thought for years. It's not the truth, but you've made it true in your mind, and you can change that. So, what I would suggest is what I call the bookends: the first 5 minutes of the day and the last 5 minutes of the day. That is when, as an adult, the brain is most open to learning new skills because the brainwave pattern is slower, like it was in that 0 to 7. It's called the theta brainwave pattern. So you're not fully awake, but you're not fully asleep. And you can rewire behavior before the brain starts to beat faster into that beta state, which we're in now. So if I wake up in the morning, I say, I'm just grateful to be alive. So I like to use a lot of positivity. Somebody opened my eyes and I have an opportunity to go out and be me again and maybe help others and maybe be a smile for somebody who's temporarily lost theirs. But I'll just auto suggest to my brain, I want to breathe as slowly as I can on my inhale and as slowly as I can on my exhale all day long. I want this to start to occur. The conscious brain, where that just was said, will send it back to the subconscious brain, and the subconscious brain will remember that. And as you practice this every morning, you'll start to have more energy. You'll start to have more awareness of yourself. You'll start to be more relaxed, and you're going to control your space. So if I control my space, this space around my arms, I have a much greater command over Shakespeare's play outside of me. I want to take care of this space. This is mine. And if I can take care of this, I can take care of that. But if I lose this space, then I'm subject to every other person's version of myself. And that's not really a great way to live because everybody else's opinion of me is not my business. It's my opinion. of me that matters. So notice during the day when you might be exhaling through your mouth, and remind the brain that I would like you to keep my mouth closed as I move through my day, unless I'm in danger. And then
Mm.
breathe through your mouth, get out of that danger, and get back to the nasal breath. And then in the morning, when you're not fully awake, first thing, I'm grateful. I have so much gratitude. I have so much appreciation to whoever put me in this particular game we're playing. And then I just remind my brain that I want to breathe like I was in that birth to 7 years when I was a young boy or girl. That's how I was breathing. That's how the DNA wants you to breathe. It doesn't want you to mouth breathe unless you're in danger or sick. It doesn't want you to be stressed. It wants you to be happy. It wants you to be healthy. It wants you to wake up from the dream that everybody told you life is going to be from 0 to 7, which was their opinion of you, not your opinion of you.
What's the problem with mouth breathing?
So, number one, when you mouth breathe, you dehydrate very quickly. So you have to drink a lot more water to stay hydrated. Now, if you have to drink a lot more water, you're going to put more water on your gastric fire, which is going to dampen your fire, which means you're going to have to use more energy because you're going to be bloated during the day because you have too much water. So nasal breathing hydrates your tissues differently than mouth breathing. Mouth breathing is a sympathetic, fancy word for fight or flight neurochemistry and fight or flight hormones. Digestion will stop. So you're going to start to hold on to energy because your brain senses danger. All the energy is going to leave your viscera and go out into your arms and legs to look and fight or freeze. So it's very debilitating to your nervous system to keep that up all day long. When you breathe through the mouth, it gets air only into the top of your lungs. And the top of your lungs, the physiology there is all stress hormones. It's all adrenaline and cortisol nerve endings because the way we were created, if you were going to breathe into the top of your lungs, you needed that energy to really be super alert and take care of yourself and take care of your family. When you inhale through your nose, the air goes into the lower lobes of your lungs, and they're all parasympathetic or relaxation, feel good, oxygenation, a lot of hemoglobin there to keep your immune system strong so you don't get sick from airborne pollutants. So this muscle does not move down on a mouth inhale. It only vertically moves east and west. So you're not as connected to your legs. And this is a time where every human has to be grounded. And grounded begins with getting your feet on the ground, feeling the strength in your legs, these grounding rods, to alert the brain that you're safe. I am here. I'm not just in my head going thought, 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 thought. So getting that downward thrust on that inhale connects your lower body with your upper body to your mind, and you're much more awake. You're more energy efficient. Also, when you breathe through your mouth, you can't have the tongue on the upper palate. When you breathe through your nose, it's easy to have the top of the tongue rest on the upper palate. There's a part of your brain called your amygdala, and it's an animalistic, fight or flight, memory-driven little piece of our brain. And when it panics, everything gets thrown off. Heart rate, blood pressure, many thoughts, stop burning fat. So when you inhale and exhale with your nose on the top of your palate, you're alerting the amygdala in your brain that everything is clear. I'm okay right now. The environment that I'm in is not threatening and I can relax a little bit. But when you breathe through your mouth, your tongue is off the upper palate and that throws the amygdala off. Why aren't we relaxed through our oral maxilla area in the face? So that's a couple reasons.
What's the quote unquote correct way to breathe? And does it depend on like the activity we're doing? So, for example, if I'm doing exercise, does it differ? If I'm doing anything strenuous, talk to us about that correct way to breathe. And I'm not sure if the correct term is it like the frequency is as well. Like because I was
Yeah.
studying a bit on breath work in terms of like breath, how many breaths per minute, etc. And I found it fascinating that, and forgive me if I'm wrong, that actually some of the fellow mammals that we live with on Earth, right, the ones that live the longest, actually have the like breathe the least, basically.
Yeah.
Talk to us
This is
about
great.
that.
This is so good. That's such a great question. So, every animal on Earth is breathing through its nose its entire life,
Mm,
unless it's hunting or being hunted. The DNA of that animal does not have the ability to break the natural organic breathing that it was born with, like humans have. So, they don't have a dual switch that they can change the breathing pattern. So, their whole life, they could be eaten at any moment. They're going to breathe through their nose unless they intuitively sense danger or they see danger. And then they're going to breathe through their mouth and get themselves out of danger to save their life. So you look at the cheetah, fastest animal on earth, can run at 80 miles an hour for like 500 yards. Does it all through its nose. What's that say?
mm,
Opens its airway. Its airway has become huge through evolution, but also it doesn't have the ability, nor would it breathe through its mouth because it knows it's not going to be as fast as long.
mm.
So it knows that. So whether you're exercising, whether you're in your self-care routine, the same principles apply. You want to exhale through your nose slowly. And if you can't
So
exhale
nose.
through the nose, that's one of
Mm,
the all-time greats. So you think about CO2, this exhale we have, this carbon and O2, the O2 that comes in. So as a species on Earth, we're exhaling as much oxygen as we're inhaling. So there's O2 and CO2. Now, what burns the waste is carbon. Carbon is a molecule, a fire molecule. This is an electrical system, and it's a
mm.
carbon based cellular system. So when you exhale longer through your nose, carbon burns anything that's interfering with oxygen distribution. So wherever oxygen touches in your body, you can't get cancer. Amazing. So supporting health, always try to breathe through your nose as slowly as you can. If you can't, then breathe fast through your nose a couple rounds, and that'll reboot something called your autonomic nervous system. It'll drop your CO2 level. It'll get O2 in your brain very quickly and bring that amygdala back into balance. So there's a whole science here about something I like to call longevity. So I want my cells, I mean, I'm 64 years old, but I want my cells to live as long as when I was 34.
Mm.
So there's certain things that I can do around breathing to slow this down, to stall the dying process of cells for a chronological 64-year-old, and I can have the biological age of a 34-year-old. And I think it's one of the holy grails. Like we get old, we have all this great awareness about life that we can share with the youth, but we all get put away in some assisted living. And then we get on medication, and then we die. I think the goal of life is don't die, is to stay alive and vibrant and as functional in society as you can possibly be, and share your stories of success and failure with the youth so that they don't have to go through the same trials and tribulations that I did.
Talk to us about what you ended on there in terms of you believe the purpose of life is not to die so you can pay forward your lessons to the next generation. Do you mean, yeah, like talk to us about that mindset, because I'm curious in terms of actually what you. So obviously I understand into like paying forward the lessons, but don't die a bit, because like everything dies at some point. So are you saying it's
Mhm.
about, in terms of longevity, maximize that for as long as possible, rather than the mindset that a lot of people fall into is like, they believe, as soon as they hit 50 or 60 or 70, like, oh, it's over. And it's like, well, at least another 30, 40, maybe even 50
Right.
years, and with new emerging tech and science and stuff, we're like, let's like keep pushing that number. And so is that kind of the mindset that you're coming from, rather than, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Brian Johnson and kind of everything that he's doing on the longevity
Yeah.
movement, where from I'm not super kind of educated on it, but from what I have listened to and know, his kind of actual deep belief is like he won't die, right? So like, where do you kind of stand on that overall messaging of like, don't die, if that makes sense? I'm curious to explore that bit.
So every person has a chronological age and they have a biological age. The only age that matters is your biological age. Because I know a lot of 80-year-olds that still move like a 40-year-old, and I know a lot of 40-year-olds that act like an 80-year-old.
Mm.
So it's all about preserving the biology. So, what are some simple things that don't cost $1 million that we can start to do to stall biological aging? What that basically means is, in a 12-month period, I'm only going to biologically age 6 months. So, number one is notice your languaging. I'm not 64 years old. I'm 64 years young. I'm just getting started. Okay, so my mindset is that of someone your age. I'm very curious. I want to stay young. I want to learn new things all the time. I'm not shrinking. I'm expanding mentally. So when my body sees these thoughts, it turns on genes for me to continue my journey of this youthful ride. When I think about death and, if I'm 64, I'm going to die of heart disease or cancer or diabetes or stroke, my body hears that and it begins to age my genes. My genes have no idea what my age is, what my birthday is. They only respond to the environment that I create for it.
Mm.
So I think a good part of it is mental. I think it's constantly learning new things and being open to trying new things, not being afraid to fail. Being humbled, is a great way without taking it personal that, I got stuff to learn. So when you think about the breath, you're going to take 20,000 breaths today. Okay. If you start to breathe slower, you're going to take less breaths today, less breaths tomorrow, and you're going to have this parasympathetic, oxygen rich you're going to be hydrated in your body, and you're going to be keeping your genes in that youthful vigor. So you can push back against the social modeling of what you're supposed to be at 65. Okay? No one should interfere with what you want to be. So, if you're stressed or you're responding to negativity and hate and resentment, that's going to start to stress your body out. It's going to dry it out. Your heart rate's going to go up. There's going to be many thoughts. You're going to be defending or attacking positions that are just mindless, and you're going to be asleep at the switch. There's other ways of being with yourself. You always want to look to take the least amount of breaths per minute as possible. Okay? If you can get down to 6 breaths a minute, okay, it's 10 seconds. A 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. That's not too hard. I mean, 6 breaths a minute puts you in a parasympathetic oxygen state, saturated with oxygen in the cells of your body. And as you move through the day, you're going to have a lower heart rate. What's the leading cause of death? Heart disease, cardiovascular disease. What's that mean? It means that your heart has already beated 20 years, probably more than what your chronological age is. And that's
Mm,
from lifestyle, stress, perception. So when you support the breath, you're supporting a healthy heart rate. When you have a healthy heart rate, your blood pressure is going to be stable. And when your blood pressure is stable, you don't create excessive inflammation. You don't create more fat and make it more difficult for oxygen to circulate through your cells. And when your blood pressure is stable, your mind is open to learning new things. And when your mind is open, your amygdala is toned down, and your body will naturally metabolize fat as its fuel source, not store fat for an anticipated war or fight. So it's all kind of connected. Now, folks like your age and the advent of AI and computers and peptides and things like that, you're going to probably live to 150. Now, what does that mean? It means that when people your age are going to be around twice as long as your parents, it means that you're going to look at the world completely differently. You're
mm.
going to look at your relationships completely differently. You're going to communicate with yourself and others differently because you're going to be here for a real long time. And you don't want to be that person that's less than loving. So it's going to change humanity very, very quickly. And there's going to be a bigger picture because we're going to be here a lot longer. And there'll be a different morality about how we see ourselves, our trials and tribulations, our stressors, and then how we see others. And it's going to happen like really quickly.
And so, what would your advice be to someone who is my age with that, with that, with what's coming, basically?
Well, how do you express love to yourself in this realm? Like what really turns you on? What are you really interested in? What have you been interested in? And staying interested with your attention
Mm.
for what you want longer than you normally do. Like give it a chance. We live in this great distracted age where everything is going off in the head and all communications very quickly, and you don't even know if communication took place. It's just like this invisible field. Like when I
Mm.
was a kid, you were either in front of someone talking or you were on the phone, and that was it. But you knew the communication took place. So there was some accountability there. Like today, it just seems like the head is just something to carry the body around. And, the body's actually really, really smart. So understanding that feelings have value, emotions have value, thoughts have value, and you're here for a reason. And if you don't know what your reason is, get quiet with yourself and listen to what your reason is for being here. Because you've set a high bar for yourself or you wouldn't be on earth right now.
Mm. Thoughts. They've come up throughout our conversation today. What is your take on thoughts? And what I mean by that is, some people believe that we can control every single thought that we have, on one extreme, and then other people believe that they are subject to their thoughts and their mental chatter and they can't control their thoughts, and people might sit somewhere in between. For myself, I think when we, as we've been talking about today, come into that place of consciousness, we can consciously choose what we think about. While on the other hand, I also think that, let's just say when I walk home later today, there might be a thought that goes past my, that I notice and goes past, just kind of comes up, goes past my mind. Um, and maybe it's something that I don't want to think about, but I can choose whether I dive into that and consciously think about it or not. And sometimes, I might be conscious but unconscious in that sense and just go down a thought path. And for me, the process of like personal growth and trying to become a better version of myself is becoming more conscious and recognizing that. So I'm wondering where you stand on thoughts. If on one extreme you believe that we control all of our thoughts or not, or or as you're saying, it depends on kind of what state we're in and if we're having that intention of like thinking consciously or not, if that, yeah, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. That's such a great question, but there's like a fork in the road. Either
Mm,
you control your thoughts or your thoughts control you. And, your thoughts can control you, but you'll notice you're not present. You're only, in your surface mind. You're not in your deeper mind.
mm,
So we know that the slower you breathe, the less thoughts you'll have. Now, you're going to have, on average, 60,000 independent thoughts, cognitive thoughts, every day of your life. Now, if you're breathing shallow or you're breathing, through your mouth and you're up here in the chest, your brain senses danger. And when your brain senses danger, it's going to create more thought because it thinks that we're in danger. So there's going to be many,
mm,
many, many, many thoughts. It's going to go really, 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 really fast, and you're always going to be late because the mind it's the air. Like you can't keep up with it. You can't outrun it. It's in the ethers. So if we can slow our breath down, we can slow our thoughts down, and we're going to have quality thoughts, not quantity thinking. So just because you can think a lot doesn't mean you should do it. Like I want my brain to always give me quality thoughts. So if I can create safety in my brain and my body by breathing in and out through my nose like every other animal on earth is doing, I'll be in a more meditative, reflective, open space with these electrical stimulations that we call thought. Now, how many thoughts do you think that are actually your thoughts? I would say very, very little.
yeah.
I would say a lot of the thoughts that we think are other people's thoughts that had been lodged in our brain when we weren't from that birth to 7 years old. Mother, father, teacher, pastor. When we were younger and we looked at the amazing larger people around us and we liked that, we didn't like that, that was okay, that was bad. And everybody else's opinion of the world at that particular mark in time becomes our reality. Guys your age are starting to wake up to the fact that that doesn't need to be your reality. You can update your software. You can live in the present moment without that past of everybody else's version of the world that came into you. And some of it was great. Like don't play in traffic. Don't close the door in your hand. Don't put your hand on the stovetop. Some of that's great. But a lot of it is very judgmental. It's very competitive. It separates us from our heart. And you're noticing folks your age are really waking up to the fact that everything on our past is just a choice. And we don't need to choose that reality if we find a better way to be ourselves in our thoughts at any particular time in our life. And you can see this is happening on the earth very, very quickly where people, especially youngsters, are asking questions like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing things that are so hateful? And, if we don't start asking questions around the old answers of the social modeling, nothing would ever change. So I think we see a lot of the youth asking questions about some of the things that are corrupted in our society like never before. And there's kind of like this unsteadiness, but it's actually huge growth.
Going back to the breath, well, no, why do you think that, and then maybe it comes back into actually what we were talking about there in terms of like the social modeling, just like how society is shaped. But one thing I've kind of realized is if it's with the breath or with anything actually within health, For most people, like they actually discover it and learn it when they go on their own personal quest, right? Their own personal journey, right? There's like this stuff isn't taught in school or in like in education, etc. And for me, maybe I'm a bit naive, Ed, but I'm like, why? Because if it was, then it would help so many people. One, it would help us to live better lives. Like I've come to this point where, in my own health journey, where or embarked on my own health journey. Sorry, because of my own challenges and stuff. And there is a part of me that thinks not that I didn't necessarily want the challenges to happen, because maybe those challenges needed to happen for me to grow, to learn the lesson, etc.
Right.
But I think that actually, if some of this was more included within education and we learnt it earlier, it would actually in some way save a lot of pain and potential suffering as well. But it's not. And so I think most people only learn it when they go through some sort of challenge or something, and they have to embark on their own journey. But what happens
Yeah.
if then there's so many other people who don't ever start that journey, so they're never going to know about the importance in this context, in our conversation, about the breath, about not mouth breathing, about everything that we've spoken about so far today. So I guess my question is why, like, one, I guess, what's your thoughts on that, and two, what can we do from a maybe an individual to society level to educate more people on not on the breath. That's what we're talking about today, but on many other different areas that's going to help us to ultimately live our best life.
That's the $1 million question. So apparently there is a visible or invisible force out there that is keeping us asleep, that is created this resistance to us waking up to the beauty that's inside us. Not everybody out there wishes us well. And I think we've all been through that in our life where our word has been misused. So, folks are in pain. Never before has there been this many people identifying with pain. And we can either use this pain to grow and evolve and become what has always been available to us, or we can take this pain and we can identify with the fear of the unknown and we can kill each other. And there's kind of a fork in the road, and I want to be on the right side of this. So there's a reason why they call it humankind, because we should be kind to each other. Where there's been missteps in our life, can we forgive ourselves? Knowing that at that particular moment on earth, we did the best we possibly could with the skills and awarenesses that we had at that particular second. Every moment of our life, we're doing the best we can. And if we could have done better, we would have. So there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be depressed about. Just forgive yourself and do better next time. There's no judgment here. We just are so hard on ourselves. We've set such a high bar that we have a tendency to shut down when we don't get what we want in the time frame that we want. Life is an endurance game. Okay, you're going to be here for a long time with little periods of sprinting. That's the way it used to be. Now it's all sprinting and no endurance, and everybody's exhausted and can't sleep at night. So just, coming back to your breath a couple times a day, and just getting still, getting silent. Use the breath to help nurture the part of yourself that you might identify with pain. And pain's a code word for fear. Fear. There's nothing wrong with every single person who's watching this podcast. Anything that you've done can be forgiven. There's nothing to feel guilty about. You can feel guilty if you don't want to self-improve. If you don't want to take these little baby steps in your self-care routine to take a little better care of your mind and body. So, the world's in pain. There's a lot of fear, but there's also a lot of love. There's a lot of light. And it doesn't take a lot of people of love and light to change the world.
Why does this matter to you, Ed? Like, why does breath work build the breath? Why does what you do, sharing your message with the world, why does it matter?
I just love people. I love people. I love being around people. I love coaching people. I love being a part of your life. I love having this conversation with you. There's just something about the human connection that brings the best of me out. And it helps me show up more in my life. I'm more present. I'm more alive. And don't get me wrong, I love my quiet time. I like my quiet time. Don't be around people all the time. But when you get the chance to connect with a human being, you get to connect with yourself through another person. You get to see your beauty through another person. Why wouldn't you want to see how beautiful you are? Because you really never get a chance to see who you are because you're not really looking clearly at who you are. So when you can interact with others, you can fall in love with yourself all over again if you want to.
What haven't we spoken about today when it comes to the breath that you feel is important to share in the final time we have left together?
I just think the breath is a way of expressing love to yourself. The breath is completely free. It's completely liberated. It's been here on the planet since it was birthed 8 billion years ago. You're breathing the same air the ancients did that built the pyramids, that did all these amazing things with matter. They could manipulate everything. So to me, if I can control my breath, I can control myself and my matter and live a more enlightened, out into the field. And the great thing about being human is that nobody gets left behind without your permission. So if you don't want to be left behind, it's impossible for us to disconnect from you. So as long as there's one person suffering on the planet, we all suffer. And we're all in this together. There is no white, black, Republican, Democrat, conservative, whatever the labels are. These are just corrupted terms that separate us temporarily. The bottom line is we're all the same when you look inside.
Ed, thank you so much. Powerful message. Powerful message. Where do people go if they want to know more about yourself, your work, connect with you? Where's the best place to send people?
Yeah, so you can go to www.edharrold.com. And on my website, I've got all sorts of great information about living the lightest, brightest, most dynamic, high-performance life you possibly can even imagine, and it might even be beyond what you can imagine. So just go to my website. There's all sorts of free stuff there. There's trainings there, and hopefully we can connect and share some energy and make the world, our community, our humans, a little kinder.
Ed, thank you so much for your time today. I've had a blast. I've learned so much. Remembered actually a lot as well from past learnings that I've kind of gathered and stuff, and it's brought that back into my consciousness as well, and some powerful messages today. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here.
Dude, you're a great man. I hope you can pause from time to time and feel that you're really producing great change on earth where you are.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Thank you, buddy.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Raising Consciousness. If you did, please subscribe to the show. It's the best way to support the podcast. If you are inspired by this episode with Ed and you want to start your breathwork journey, the number one place that I recommend you do so is with Soma Breath. I've mentioned some breath a few times on the podcast because it's where I go to for all of my breathwork practices, and it's the number one breathwork platform and community. They really focus on that community spirit, which I love, and I would recommend that you start there. If you want to get started with Soma Breath, then click the link in the show notes below, And I will also link the episode with Niraj, who is the founder of Soma Breath, that I had the pleasure of talking to a couple of years ago on the podcast. Once again, thank you for tuning into this episode of the podcast. I look forward to seeing you, talking to you in the next episode.